Good morning, everybody. Welcome to CMSRI's Facebook Live this morning with Dr. Christopher Exley. Thank you so much for joining us. And while we're waiting for our followers to get on this morning, I'm just going to give a brief introduction about CMSRI. And so I'm Claire Dwoskin. I founded CMSRI in 2012 in response to a gathering of scientists that were discussing the issue of chronic illness and disability and the role that aluminum toxicity was playing in the onset of a lot of these conditions that we're seeing on the rise today, such as Alzheimer's disease, autism, autoimmune disease. And we had brought together a group of scientists and medical professionals who are working in this area, all top leaders in their fields like Dr. Exley. And aluminum was a great concern among many of those present. And we realized that there really wasn't much research on the safety of aluminum and in how it is used in medical products, foods, and cosmetics, cookware, and that we wanted to bring more research to bear on this issue and do it in a way that we felt could actually help people in their everyday lives avoid aluminum toxicity and improve their health. So since 2012 we've been funding Dr. Exley's research. He is at Keele University in the UK, and he is professor of bioinorganic chemistry, and he's been studying aluminum and aluminum in the environment and how it interacts with both plants, animals, and all living things. And he's also been studying the relationship between aluminum and silicon, which is one of the reasons we're here today with this Fiji water detox and epilepsy support group, because you all have found benefit from the research that Dr. Exley has been doing. And it is also the group that you have put together and the observations that you're making with your children and family members that is spurring on some of the research ideas that Dr. Exley is now pursuing. So with that, we'd like to hear a little bit from Dr. Exley, and then we'll start going through some questions, some commonly asked questions that we've been seeing on this Facebook page, and then we'll allow you to have your own questions. So with that, Dr. Exley.
Thank you, Claire. Good morning. It's lovely to be here in Washington on your Facebook Live program. Yeah, I mean, maybe a little bit of context. The reason why probably we are here today and particularly discussing silicon and aluminium is that in my PhD research more than 30 years ago now, I was interested then, why is aluminium toxic to all living things, and in particular I was working on fish. And in that work, I just through pure serendipity came across a relationship with silicon, which showed me that if you put silicon back into a system where there was aluminium, it protected the fish from aluminium. Thereafter started this beautiful sort of story for me of the role of silicon as being the natural protecting molecule against the possible toxicity of aluminium in all living things. And the natural progression from that was that we started to look at ways in which humans might benefit from this, because the truth is very stark. Aluminium is bad for us, whether you are a bacterium or a human. Aluminium does not do any living thing anything positive. It can only be negative. So being able to remove aluminium and reduce the amount of aluminium in, for example, the human body is absolutely critical. As far as I'm concerned, we are probably sitting on some sort of aluminium time bomb for the future. In fact, that time bomb has already been ticking for about 100 years. It means that we are all accumulating aluminium in our body. What can we do about that? Well, one of the things we can do about it is to, in our everyday life, to try to find ways of reducing our exposure, both reducing the way in which we take in aluminium, but also helping to remove the aluminium that's already in the body. And so the early research essentially found out that if you drank anything actually which had a high content of soluble silicon, something we call silicic acid, then you produce aluminium in your urine. So it's a beautiful way, simple, effective, completely safe way of excreting aluminium from the body. And so thereafter comes the decision, well, how can we bring this technology or this science to the general public in the simplest possible way? And we started a quest. The quest was, is there something that people can take easily which will put soluble silicon inside their body, into their bloodstream, to enable them to excrete aluminium? And the short answer to that is, after 30 years of looking for something, we're still at where we are now, which is the only way in which we can do this safely and effectively, knowing that that process cannot do us any harm, is by drinking what I call a silicon-rich mineral water. And that's what brings us to where we are today.
Well, thank you for that quick overview, and I have to say I have been absolutely fascinated with the research on aluminum that Dr. Exley and some of the other CMSRI-funded scientists have done over the last 10 years, and I find aluminum so fascinating because of the relationship between aluminum toxicity and all of the diseases that have been on the rise over the last 100 years since we have been processing aluminum and extracting it from its very tight bonds with the other elements that it's bound to in the Earth's crust, and releasing that so that it is bioavailable. And some of the really interesting facts that I have found out, one of which Chris just mentioned about the aluminum leaching from soils and causing fish kills when there's been acid rain. I remember when Dr. Exley was mentioning that in a conference, a doctor stood up and, well, Dr. Exley said that the mechanism of action was that it was basically harming the fish's gills and making it so that they could not breathe, and so the fish were all suffocating. And so a doctor stood up and said, I wonder if the same mechanism may be what's causing all of the asthma and breathing problems in children who are so highly vaccinated. And so there are those kinds of anecdotes that that supplement the research that Chris is doing, and anecdotes that this group, the Fiji Water Epilepsy Support Group, are providing on a daily basis with your contributions to the page, telling us what's happening with your children. And we want to help support what you're doing in healing your children, and as well as doing the good bench science that Chris is doing to make sure that what we are doing is scientific. So with that, I'm going to start asking Chris some questions, and these are questions that we hear a lot from people on different Facebook groups, so bear with us if we're repeating anything you may already know. We're trying to reach a wider audience today. So Chris, tell us what really distinguishes a silicon-rich mineral water from other mineral waters.
Yeah, so again, what we're going to, we have a definition, and the definition is based upon the best science we have at the moment. So the definition is, when you look at a mineral water, which you might buy in your local supermarket, your local store, silicon might be mentioned on it as one of the ingredients. It's not always. But when it is, it's usually not written as silicon. It's usually written as something called silica, which is a little bit misleading because there's generally no silica in any mineral waters. But this is an old sort of standard that the water authorities used to use. So where you see the word silica, what you're then looking for is a concentration of that particular ingredient greater than 30 milligrams per liter, or 30 parts per million. The milligram per liter, part per million are the same units. Why 30? The way in which a silicon-rich mineral water works is that when you take a drink of it, the silicon, which is in the form of silicic acid, soluble silicon, follows water. So the water goes into your gut with the silicic acid. The water goes from your gut into your bloodstream. The silicic acid follows it. And what happens is you need to get a sufficiently high concentration of silicic acid in the bloodstream for it to effectively begin to remove aluminium from your body. So what happens is if you reach that concentration, and that's why we've identified 30 milligrams per litre as being a critical concentration. At 30 or above, you will get a high enough concentration of silicic acid or silicon in your bloodstream so that it will form complexes with aluminium. And these complexes are small enough to be filtered by the kidney into your urine so that you can excrete it in your urine. Any concentration lower than 30, you will get some benefit from it. But we think that it's quite critical to have that concentration in terms of it being effective, in terms of not having to drink litres of the water every day. Indeed, I personally drink about a litre of a silicon-rich mineral water every day. So the volume is not so important once you've got that 30 or above concentration.
Very good. Well, another interesting aspect of aluminum and silicon that I have found is that so the chemistry of silicic acid is formed when sand, which is silica, dissolves into the water under heat and pressure, usually as the spring comes up through a volcanic source. And so the way carbon can turn into a diamond, sand can turn into silicic acid. And so for your health, this compound, silicic acid, is as valuable as a diamond.
Well, I would say it's even more valuable, but
Yes.
I've actually written a paper which is under review at the moment where we're making a case for silicic acid, soluble silicon, after water being the most important molecule the Earth has seen. Most important simply because over the entire age of the Earth, it stopped aluminium going into living things and causing them to die or change. You know, I put a sentence in this new paper. We would not know what life would be like if silicic acid had not been present from the moment go through to the moment we have today in keeping aluminium out. And of course, the big quandary that people sometimes find difficult to understand is, so what's different about 100 million years ago when the Earth was evolving and today? Well, the difference is that 120 years ago, we learned how to take the Earth's crust made of aluminium, silicon, and oxygen and make aluminium metal and make aluminium salts. And this is actually the first time that the Earth, not just human beings, but the Earth has experienced large amounts of biologically available aluminium. And so the natural protection has been overcome by an activity of man. And this is what we find all the time about our own activities, of course. Everyone's interested in things like climate change. Those are the activities of man altering the natural progression of the Earth as a living organism. So man has a big impact, and one of those big impacts, in my opinion, has been the extraction of aluminium and the formation and making of aluminium salts and metal, because that has overcome the natural protection that the Earth has against aluminium. So this is all about putting that natural protection back into your life, putting silicon and silicic acid back into your life so that you have the natural protection that the Earth has had the 5 billion years it's been here before. And without that, at the moment, you know, we live in a way in which there is no natural protection because we use aluminium in so many different ways. And let's get it clear, aluminium has been incredibly useful to us. Our modern way of life is not possible without aluminium. What's important, of course, is that when you introduce something new into living, that you are sure not only that you get benefit from it, but it's also safe to do so. My argument would be right now that obviously that We don't have that regulation in place. We don't know that our use of aluminium is safe. So what should we do about it? We should look after ourselves. We should protect ourselves. Regular drinking of silicon-rich mineral water.
So I know everybody here who's with us today is here because they have a child or a loved one who is suffering from some kind of seizure-related disorder. And I want to get right to some of those topics because Dr. Exley has been not only doing the research that has formed the foundation for the therapeutic use that you parents are all using with your children today and getting incredible results from, but also he is doing some bench science and would like to tell you what he's observing. And with that, Chris, can you tell him a little bit about your recent study in epilepsy?
Yes, well, I can only tell you a little bit actually because the epilepsy work is not yet published.
Mm-hmm.
But again, we had a situation where we were given an opportunity to look at the brain tissue of someone who had developed adult onset epilepsy. And the interesting thing about this individual was that this person, we knew that in the background of this person was significant exposure to aluminium, environmental exposure, actually probably through their drinking water. And following this exposure, they developed this adult onset epilepsy. So we have had the opportunity to both look at how much aluminium is present in the brain tissue of this individual, and also we're able to look at where the aluminium is in that brain tissue. So in that respect, I can't give you any specific results at the moment, but you probably can guess that aluminium is going to be implicated.
Post about your children, and some of you are suffering terribly with hundreds of seizures a day and grand mal seizures, different types of seizures, and to be able to provide some research that may benefit your child or prevent this from happening in the first place is something that we're very interested in at CMSRI. And we hope that the information that you will learn today and continue to read from Dr. Exley's research will help you spread the word, hopefully among people who might be able to help support the research that we're doing, and hopefully that you'll be able to provide some support for us so that we can continue to help you benefit your children with this information. So we know that there's a lot of questions about how should the water be drank, how in what quantities, and for what ages, different quantities should be applied. So Dr.
I think, what's important, I think, are some practicalities. The first point is that silicon-rich mineral waters are not magic bullets. I don't even consider them in any form to be a medicine, a drug, even as people call them, detox or chelation. In fact, I consider a silicon-rich mineral water more like a philosophy. So the role of a silicon-rich mineral water is not to produce sudden removal of aluminium and lowering the body burden of aluminium within short periods of time. The way in which they work most effectively is that you drink one on a regular basis. And it doesn't really matter to a certain extent how you drink that. At least science at the moment is not well enough developed to know this. Personally, I have a silicon-rich mineral water sitting on my desk at my office. I would probably drink around 1 liter a day over a 9 or 10 hour period in my office. So I would drink it in small quantities over that period of time. And that is probably an effective way of doing that. You should then think about this as being something that you simply do. So yes, you may begin to see some benefits within relatively short periods of time. But what we really want to see We don't necessarily want to see, yes, within a week somebody's getting all these different benefits. No, I want to see that within a month, within 6 months, within a year, within 2 years, that not only are those benefits sustained, but maybe they are improved upon. And this has to be, I think, at the basis for whatever you decide to do. You know, decide that silicon-rich mineral waters are going to be helpful to you, and add them to you, your child, your spouse, whoever it might be, normal life. Now, as adults, we can sit down and we can drink easily a litre a day, but a child may not want to, or may not be able to do that. Really, you're looking to say, well, does your child drink water? And hopefully they do anyway, so replace the water they are normally drinking with a silicon-rich mineral water. Would your child prefer it if it was mixed in a cordial to make an orange or a lime or a lemon drink? Yes, that's fine too. Do that. There is also, while I would prefer to see the mineral waters drunk neat or used to make other cold drinks, if you want to use it to make tea or coffee, or for example, for an infant formula, to make an infant formula so that you're putting some silicon into your infant in that way, then a single boiling of a silicon-rich mineral water will not do it any harm, but I would always advise against multiple boiling. So if you need to boil to use to make a drink, or as I said, an infant formula, then do so once, but once only. And that, again, will be an effective way of using the water. But some people will see some really interesting and hopefully beneficial changes within a relatively short period of time, but don't think, well, that's it, job done or something. It isn't. This is not how it works. Once we have been affected by aluminium, that memory is within us. If we stop protecting ourselves against our exposure to aluminium, that memory will be reignited in the future. And
so we're more susceptible after an initial
absolutely
exposure?
I'm absolutely sure that is the case, and in some individuals that susceptibility comes to the fore in the form of some form of chronic disease. And that can be from conception all the way through to any point in adulthood. You can suddenly get that exposure which leaves behind the memory of that exposure, which means that if you don't give yourself continuous protection over your life, at some other point it can return.
So the memory that you're talking about, is that like an epigenetic up or down regulation that promotes a particular inflammatory or disease process related to aluminum?
Yeah, I mean, I would put it very simply as a sensitivity.
A sensitivity.
And clearly that's physiologically based. It's not psychologically based, it's a physiological mechanism. But I think that's as much as we need to know at the moment, that there is plenty of evidence to suggest that once you've had a traumatic exposure of some sort to aluminium, that does leave some sort of signature, some sort of memory in that individual, and it can be triggered again at any point in the future. And particularly if you're not protecting yourself against accumulating aluminium throughout your tissues.
So Chris has also done some research on drinking a silicon-rich mineral water prior to exercise, and has found that the increased amount of aluminum in the sweat is highly significant. Can you tell the readers a little bit about that?
Well, I think the overall message is that there are ways in which you can add to your protection with respect to human exposure to aluminium. And one of those is definitely exercise. And we know that because when you sweat, aluminium content of sweat is very high.
How much higher?
Well, the aluminium content of sweat is such that sweating could be actually the main way that your body removes aluminium from internal aluminium. It could be. Our early work with the silicon-rich mineral waters shows that there may also be a connection there. In other words, when you drink the silicon-rich mineral water, you not only increase aluminium excretion through your urine, but you also do so through sweating. So, you know, exercise is where possible, is really important. It's something that's a combination with silicon-rich mineral water. You know, often people say to you, Chris, well, what do you do in your everyday life to protect yourself against aluminium? And you know, very few people know more about aluminium than I do, but I know that I cannot protect myself fully from aluminium. I know that there will be things that I do where I will be consuming aluminium, where I'll be using aluminium, where I'll be breathing aluminium that I wouldn't know about or wouldn't know how to protect myself about. So you can do some simple things if it's possible. So avoid processed foods. I mean, almost every form of processed food will be contaminated in some way with aluminium. And there are probably, you know, what we'd like to see is we would like to see the use of aluminium in medications, including things like vaccines, etc., to be revisited in terms of their safety so that we can make them more safe in terms of exposure, because there is a lot of aluminium involved in medicine and, in fact, you know, in other sort of similar types of applications. But often, many of these things can't be avoided, and that is, of course, why your ability to protect yourself with a silicon-rich mineral water is the best option, is the option I choose, because I do not want to spend my life worrying about aluminium. I mean, I think about it a lot because it's my research area. Mm-hmm. But what you want to be able to do is have a fail-safe. And I honestly believe that silicon-rich mineral waters are fail-safes. They are something that if you know you do it every day, and it doesn't matter if you miss a day sometimes, it's just keep it as regular as possible. You will be giving yourself some protection. You know, every aluminium atom that's in our body extracts a little bit of energy from us. And so if you can remove and reduce the number of aluminium atoms in your body is then expending less energy getting rid of them or dealing with their presence, which should mean that even if the only benefit is you feel a little bit more vital, yes, that's exactly what you can get from it.
So one of the things that I do is I'll drink a liter of silicon-rich mineral water and sit in a small sauna I have at home and get a good sweat that way. And you know, whether or not your children are able to sit in a sauna for 15 or 20 minutes after drinking some silicon-rich mineral water, that may be a way to increase their aluminum excretion, but that's one of the things that I do on a weekly basis. And I do feel that I feel better as a result of it.
There's been some really interesting research in similar areas to this. So, for example, there's been great research showing that regular sauna, yes, protects against Alzheimer's disease. I mean, how is that possible?
There has to be a link between all of these things together.
We know that females are more predisposed to Alzheimer's disease than males. We also know that naturally females sweat about half as much as a man. So females look like you have a lesser ability to excrete aluminium than men. And we're not talking about because men do more exercise. No, we're talking about a man and a woman sitting next to each other doing absolutely no exercise at all. The man will still produce about twice the volume of sweat that a female will produce, which means that a man at least has a more effective way of removing aluminium, and perhaps that's why there's a difference in things like the incidence of Alzheimer's. Who knows?
So I know you can't say too much about your research on your research study that you're doing on epilepsy, but did you have a hypothesis on the mechanism for the role of aluminum in epilepsy that you could share?
I think it's too early. Clearly, anything that disrupts the function of the hippocampus, which is absolutely involved in or at least disruption of the hippocampus is absolutely involved in epilepsy and epileptic seizures, is going to be part of that. But no, I would say that at this stage, we are really in the very early stages of this. You know, we need to follow this up. We need to do further research. I mean, I want to add that some of you will already be aware of our recent research on autism, and where we looked at 10 brains from individuals who died with autism. And of those 10 individuals, I think 4 of them had epilepsy. And we know that epilepsy and autism are very commonly found together. So this is, again, something where what we found for autism, what we're now finding for epilepsy, is bringing together these different, some might have thought them as disparate areas, they're not. There could simply be one common agonist, one common thing which is making these conditions worse or even bringing them to fruition. And that could simply be the aluminium in the brain tissue.
Well, Chris, this is really remarkable information, and I would love to be able to answer some of your questions that are coming in live. And here, let me. Okay, so some people have been asking about some of the other products that contain silica, and why are those products not effective in removing aluminum the way silica-rich mineral water is, and what is the difference in the chemistry and the application for people who are concerned?
I mean, exactly, and this is a common question that we have.
And in specific, people are mentioning products like Cosiva, Advanced TRS, Zeolite, and other purified waters. Are they safe? Are they effective?
Well, dealing with things that are commonly known as silicon supplements or silica supplements, these are silica almost exclusively. Silica, not soluble silicon. And even though sometimes our research is used by these companies to sell their products, what these products are not capable of doing is putting sufficient soluble silicon and silicic acid into the bloodstream quickly enough to effect the removal of aluminium. Now, these products may have other benefits completely unrelated to aluminium. So I'm not saying don't take these for any other reason. If you get a benefit from them, please go ahead and take them. You know, some of the other products I'm a little bit more worried about. I've heard this stuff about zeolites and other things like that. You know, I was asked by the German government to review the safety of zeolites for human consumption, and my conclusion, which I gave to them, was that that until we have sufficient safety studies to show that these things are in the first instance safe for human ingestion, I personally wouldn't even take one of them. Can they have any benefit with respect to aluminium? No, they can't. Could they have other benefits? That's possible, but do we have any science to prove that? No, we don't. No, I emphasize this over and over and again. We are scientists. Our research, first-class, world-class research, has shown that silicon facilitates the removal of aluminium from the body. There is no other research on anything else which has done this. So we know that it is not only effective, but it is safe to drink one of these waters. And that's what's absolutely paramount to us. The last thing you want to be doing is doing something that you think might be helping in one way, and then, of course, causing trouble in another.
And we had another question about how do we really know that we're getting the aluminum out of our brain when we're drinking a silicon-rich mineral water?
Yeah. Listen, first of all, no one knows that, including me, because we cannot do these sorts of experiments on human beings.
Live.
So we can't just say, right, okay, we'll drink silicon-rich mineral water and we'll test a bit of your brain. No, this is obviously not something we can do. However, first of all, a lot of people ask me, well, I want to measure aluminium excretion. Listen, this is not a trivial thing. I do not recommend any method outside of the academic laboratory where you can get valuable information on your excretion of aluminium, whether it be in your urine or, for example, in your sweat, because this is not a simple thing to do. However, I have been doing this for over 30 years. We have been making these measurements. We have been publishing it. So when I tell you that aluminium is going to be removed from your body by drinking a silicon-rich mineral water, that is the case. So as soon as you start drinking a silicon-rich mineral water, you will start excreting aluminium. Is it coming from your brain? Yes, it is. the only reason I can say that is because I know pretty much the mechanism of how it works. And essentially what the silicon-rich mineral water does is it removes aluminium from your blood. Once the aluminium from your blood is removed, the rest of the aluminium in the body is in what we call an equilibrium. So it moves from the tissues into the blood to replace the aluminium that was removed. And then it's removed again, and more moves from the tissues, including the brain.
And a study that you published several years ago in the Journal of Alzheimer's Disease, where Alzheimer's patients were given 1.5 liters of silica-rich mineral water to drink every day for 3 months. Cognitive function was measured before they started drinking and after they started drinking, and there were statistically significant improvements in cognitive function over the 3-month period in some of the patients.
That's right. So I mean, in that particular study, again, 12 weeks of drinking, as you say, up to 1.5 liters of silicon-rich mineral water every day, and the compliance of these individuals was magnificent. What we showed was that in every case, no one's cognitive performance got any worse, but in 3 of the 15 individuals, they actually showed clinically relevant improvements in their cognitive performance, to the extent that, you know, the Alzheimer's clinicians which worked with us on this project were quite really astounded by that.
Because there's no other drug on the market that can achieve
No.
these kinds of results. And so this is something that is another area of research that is so important and vital that we be able to get funded, because so many people are expected to be getting Alzheimer's disease over the coming decades. The rate of increase in Alzheimer's is expected to rise dramatically, and to be able to prevent this from happening or to treat a case once it has started, to have the knowledge is something that we're very interested in bringing forth. So
Absolutely. Yeah.
So
I mean, what we've been wanting to do for so long is a clinical trial relevant to something like Alzheimer's disease. In other words, probably recruiting individuals who have the very earliest symptoms of Alzheimer's and getting them onto a program of regular drinking of silicon-rich mineral waters and following the progression of their disease over time.
mm-hmm.
You know, this is going to be not only the test of whether we could actually have some mechanism of helping people with Alzheimer's. There is nothing at the moment, no Alzheimer's disease drugs
And nothing
work.
really in the pipeline that is showing this kind of efficacy.
But also it is indirectly a test of the aluminium hypothesis of Alzheimer's, that aluminium has a role in the disease, which I firmly believe that it does.
Yes. Well, even to have achieved stable disease in the rest of the patients that may not have had improvements in their cognitive function, but they did not decline over that 3-month period. Again, the existing drugs on the market are not able to achieve that. So the importance, to underscore Chris is saying that it's important to protect ourselves by drinking a silica-rich mineral water. You've seen it with your children who are having epilepsy, and you've seen them either stabilize or significantly improve. In a few cases, we have heard from parents that the seizures temporarily got worse and they were dissuaded from continuing to drink the water because of the increase in seizures after starting to drink the Fiji water. Chris, can you comment on that at all?
Yeah, it's interesting. In all of the clinical trials that we've done with silicon-rich mineral waters, we've rarely been, and all of the participants in those, and these are clinical trials with healthy individuals, with Alzheimer's, with multiple sclerosis, and 1 or 2 others. And everyone who's recruited into those trials keeps diaries. And almost in no case have we seen any really significant side effects. However, I do get quite a lot of anecdotal information sent to me through email and other ways where people do see something unusual immediately on starting a silicon-rich mineral water. And if that is something which you perceive as making something worse, then my initial thinking is perhaps one could reduce the volume of water that's being drunk, or change the way in which you're drinking the water. So for example, are you drinking 500 mils, half a litre at a time, when maybe it'd be better just to drink 50 mils every hour or something? In other words, make small changes to the regime, the water drinking regime, to see if that impacts or not. But if we look at the obvious scenario, if by drinking a silicon-rich mineral water, you are releasing aluminium from body tissues into the blood, and it is then needs to be filtered by the kidney, so it can be excreted in your urine or via your sweat, then there will be times when there are quite high contents of aluminium in the bloodstream. Now, whether or not that is responsible for some of these side effects, we literally don't know. I mean, this is where, the fact that we've been unable to do a great deal of research to try to answer these questions leaves us in this position. We've done so much that we've to get so far, but as always in science, and particularly in this case where we're dealing with health sciences and human diseases, questions are raised all the time, and we simply can't address this because we simply don't have the funding to do so.
Well, please reach out through your sources, and if you know of people who are interested in this topic, who have resources that they could donate to CMSRI, we will make sure those resources are applied directly to Chris's research in this area. So we had another question about how does aluminum get into breast milk? Will Fiji water cause more aluminum to be excreted in breast milk and go into their babies? That's a very good question.
That's a very interesting question. So, I do not know the answer to that question. Right, that's my first point. We have measured, and in fact we are measuring aluminium in breast milk. And the good news is that generally aluminium in breast milk is quite low for the vast majority of individuals. We have no evidence that drinking a silicon-rich mineral water increases the aluminium content of breast milk, but it is certainly something that we would like to investigate, definitely. Now, I would say that the benefits of drinking the silicon-rich mineral water will always outweigh the possible if there are any negatives. So, for example, if the aluminium content of breast milk is increased by drinking a silicon-rich mineral water, that aluminium should be in a form in combination with silicon in these things we call hydroxyaluminosilicates, and should be non-toxic. So there should be a form of aluminium that even if you are feeding it to your infant through your breast milk, should be rapidly excreted or not even absorbed by the infant's gut. Should be. But again, this is a great question because that highlights an area that we don't know enough about. So, people, we are looking at another scenario at the moment through actually research funded by CMSRI, is what happens if you use silicon-rich mineral water to prepare an infant formula. Now, infant formulas are scandalously contaminated with aluminium, and it is I believe, one of the great scandals of our time that is the case. We're about to publish something new in this area coming up soon, so watch this space on that. But generally, there's too much aluminium in infant formulas, and many parents have asked me, what can we do about this? So we're looking into, if you make the infant formula with a silicon-rich mineral water, how might that affect its absorption across the gut into the infant, or indeed the subsequent excretion? Now, we can't do those experiments on infants. So we set up a model stomach in the lab where we're doing those experiments. And the early results on those are, and that's why I'm prepared to say something now about it, is that the silicon does appear to reduce the amount of aluminium that we would believe to go across the gut. In other words, it's helping the infant to excrete the aluminium directly in their feces as opposed to it going into the body and having to be excreted via the urine. So it looks like a silicon-rich mineral water is going to be a benefit to an infant. Now, not only that, of course, a silicon-rich mineral water-based infant formula is full of silicic acid. So the infant will also get the silicic acid, and it will also help the infant to excrete any aluminium they already have, and that could have come from the mother, or at any point it could have come from a vaccine.
Immunizations.
A vaccine, of course. It will give the infant a chance to excrete in the urine. And infants generally don't drink a lot of water. The first few months of life, you're either breast milk or your infant formulas. And in either case, if you're breast milk and your mother is drinking regularly a silicon-rich mineral water, then the breast milk will have lots of silicic acid in there. If it's infant formula, you make it up with a silicon-rich mineral water, you're going to have that benefit too. So I think it's going to be a benefit to infants too. And again, we are close to publishing. In the next 12 months, we will publish in this area, so you'll have some real science to go on.
So another question has come in about horsetail, and is horsetail able to provide enough silicic acid to, in the right form, to remove aluminum from the body?
Horsetail, my favorite plant, grows all over my garden. I've done a lot of research on horsetail because horsetail accumulates silica in its tissues. But the really important thing I just said there was horsetail accumulates silica in its tissues. And if I want to study this silica in horsetail, I take the horsetail, I put it into a tube, I add the two strongest mineral acids on the planet, sulfuric acid and nitric acid, I put it in a microwave at 180 degrees, and then everything appears like it's been dissolved. I get a clear solution. I filter that solution, and what's left over? Silica. Now, that tells us that that silica does not deliver silicic acid. It is completely inert. It cannot be broken down by the two strongest mineral acids on the planet. So, horsetail may provide all sorts of benefits as a silica supplement. It will not help the removal of aluminium from the body.
Okay, so quickly, we have 5 minutes left, and I want to just ask a couple questions quickly. People are concerned about the natural fluoride that is found in Fiji water. Is that something that you would be concerned about?
I get asked these questions quite a lot. Fluoride does not concern me unless it's above 1 ppm, 1 milligram per liter.
Is there a difference between the natural form of fluoride that comes from a mineral water versus the type of fluoride, let's say, that's added to water in processing? Is there a difference? No, there's no difference.
We're talking about the same element. We're talking about high concentrations of fluoride are bad with respect to aluminium. Low concentrations have no real impact. You know, personally, I am against putting fluoride in drinking water. I just think this is not. I'm against mass medication anyway. But in terms of the amount that I know is present in off-the-shelf silicon-rich mineral waters, and for example, we were involved in bringing one into the UK called, from Malaysian Spritzer, now called acidics. I went through all the processes with the laboratory chemist of the United Kingdom, seeing all of the data on this water before it was allowed to be sold in the UK. And the fluoride concentrations are extremely low. So I'm not sure what they are in other available mineral waters, but the local regulations, whether it's in the US, the EU, or wherever it should be, should mean that it's less than 1 ppm.
Okay, that's good to know. So one last question is, why is there more Alzheimer's now? But I think we sort of covered that with the increase in the amount of aluminum exposure that we've seen. I know that Chris's research on using a silicon-rich mineral water to demonstrate that aluminum is present in the brains of people who have Alzheimer's, and that when you remove it, that cognitive function improves. And so,
you know, I think one of the things we can quickly talk about is, why is there so much chronic human disease now? We are not getting healthier, we are just getting older. And aging is the major risk factor for most of these types of diseases. And I'm sorry, but one of the other closely related facts to do with aging is the accumulation of aluminium, and specifically in your central nervous system and brain tissue. Now, does that mean that aluminium is causing all of these? No, but does it mean that aluminium can contribute to them and make the disease, be manifested perhaps much earlier than it would normally be? Yes, it does. So, we have epidemics of chronic human disease.
So one other little fun fact that I uncovered, I was reading about the book, The Blue Zones, where areas in the world where people live healthily over the age of 100 or well into their 90s. And so I did a little research on the geology of all of these places and found that all of the geology in all of the Blue Zone countries is from volcanic activity. So, which likely means the water in all of those areas are high in silicic acid. And we know for a fact that in Japan, the tap water that comes out of people's taps is as high in silicic acid in Japan as Fiji water is. So from birth, Japanese children are being exposed to this protective level of silicic acid throughout their lives, and they have 3 times more people in Japan that are living over the age of 100 than we do in the United States. So anyway, that's one of those little fun facts that I have. But
one of the things that people talk about these days are these functional waters. Listen, the only functional water for which there is scientific evidence of benefit are silicon-rich mineral waters. Bear that in mind next time you buy a smart water or a functional water or anything else that's written on the bottle. Ask for the science that proves any of these things that actually do what they say on the bottle. This silicon-rich mineral waters do what they say on the bottle.
So I wanted to mention a couple of things. Tomorrow we're going to have another webinar. It's going to be Alzheimer's focused, and it's going to be on our Facebook Live page at noon. And on Saturday, we're going to be live from the Achieving Optimal Health Conference at 2 p.m. on Saturday, which will be hosted by Georgetown University. And on Monday, we're going to have an autism-focused Facebook Live at 10 a.m. So please set your calendars and join us and spread the word among those people who you think might be interested in hearing more from Chris about those things. And I just wanted to underscore again the importance of research funding. The research that we do is independent. We don't have an agenda other than to find out how is aluminum affecting our health. How is it affecting our cognitive function, motor skill function, social function, genes, and other biomarkers. Because we have an increasingly sick society, our healthcare system cannot sustain the level of chronic illness that we're experiencing now. And we would like to make a difference. We want to help people avoid these conditions as well as help them treat them and improve them so they have better health outcomes. So please give generously if you can and help reach out to others who you think might be able to fund some research and let them know about CMSRI. Get in touch with us if you have ideas about funding. We'd love to hear from you. We love the fact that this group has formed organically to take some of the research that we've been doing and put it to use in a new and novel way. And we would like to support what you're doing by continuing to do research in this area.
I would just like to add, first of all, I would thank Claire. I am not in Washington by chance. I've come here simply because we are at a sort of tipping point in terms of the way in which our research is funded. It is almost impossible to get research funding from the usual sources to work on anything which implicates aluminium in human disease. And so, for example, working on silicon-rich mineral waters, you would imagine that all these companies like Fiji and others would be providing us with funding. No, this is not the case. There is no funding coming from any silicon-rich mineral water to support our research. We do not take funding, nor is it offered from any of them. We are not getting funded by the usual government sources of funding. We are clearly not getting funded by industry. We are not getting funded by the major charities which are supposed to be looking after people with Alzheimer's, with multiple sclerosis, with autism. So philanthropy has become the most important source of research for us. Our research is cutting edge. Our research is right there at the top of anything worldwide in this area. But I have to be frank with everyone listening. If we don't get research funding, this research will end. It will stop. Because there's only so much that we can get through other types of sources, and we are really calling out to people who know that they are benefiting from the work that we have done to help us to keep that going. There's so much research we need to do, and we've talked about it already on this particular Facebook Live, the things that we don't know. We don't know more than we know, of course that's the case. And we would prioritize the type of experiments that we'd like to do depending on the sort of funding that's available. But if we don't get the funding, the research will stop, and it will stop within months, not years. It's absolutely critical now, and that's why I'm here in Washington, simply to do as many of these sorts of webinar type opportunities to let people know, because everybody you talk to, they think that this research must be being funded. It's so important, it's so critical, and I agree, obviously I agree, it's important and it's critical. But is it getting funded by the usual funding sources? No, it is not. Nor will it be, the truth be. It won't be.
And CMSRI is unique in that it's an all-volunteer organization. There are no salaries paid, no overhead, and 100% of your research, your donations go to fund the research. So with that, I just want to thank you, Chris, for being with this group today, and thank you for joining us. We're signing off now.
Thank you, Claire. Thank you very much.